Hello, everyone. How are we today? Happy Sunday. It's a beautiful day out there. So I just wanted to take a moment. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be here. We're so excited to have you. My name is Mackenzie. I'm the vice chair of the Merrimack Democratic Committee and also serve on the Hillsborough Executive Group as well. So I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker who's going to be introducing Tom Steyer to all of you. Alejandro Rita serves as the chair of the Hudson Democratic Committee. He serves as the chair of the Latino caucus here in New Hampshire, and he also serves on the New Hampshire Advisory Board for the Federal Rights Commission here in the state of New Hampshire. So it is my honor to introduce Alejandro to all of you.
Thank you. Well, that is wonderful to see, despite all this raining and this weather, to be here. And that is because we are here because we care. You know, this is a time where money is trying to speak louder than the people. And to save the democracy is a responsibility of everyone, of all of us. Doesn't matter what is the social status or the economic power we may have, but we have the obligation to step in and work to save the democracy. And that is to see a successful businessman, that he has been able to build, to become wealthy with honesty and hard work. Someone that he's been out of his comfort zone and to be altruistic for many years. And he's one of the first voices that I'm speaking up to uncover the corruption that is today in Washington. We need to stop, and to have somebody like that is stepping in to stop that corruption is great. So it's for me a honor and a pleasure to introduce to all of us Tom Steyer. And I am very grateful that he decided to step in and to run for the presidency of the United States.
Hey guys, good afternoon. So the goal of this actually is to have a conversation and to answer as many questions as you have. But I thought I'd give a short introduction in terms of why I'm running and a little bit about who I am. I am running for a very simple reason, which is I believe that the government in Washington has failed. I believe it's been purchased by corporations. And so any of the things that we want in terms of healthcare and education, a living wage, clean air, clean water, climate action, we're not going to get until we take back our government. And so to me, that is job number one, which is to get back to government of, by, and for the people. And just so you know, for the last 10 years, I started a business a long time ago, one room, no employees, no windows. And over 27 years, I built it up into a pretty big international business. And then I walked away from it. I took the giving pledge to give the bulk of my money away while I was alive to good causes. And I, for full time, have been organizing coalitions of American citizens since then to take on unchecked corporate power. So what does that look like? Just in 26 states, including my home state of California, if you put a proposition on the ballot and enough people vote for it, it becomes law. And so under those circumstances, I've taken on the oil companies over clean air. And I did it because no one else was stupid enough to do it, because everybody knows the oil companies have unlimited money, are totally ruthless, and will do whatever it takes to win. And we got 70% of the vote. I've taken on the tobacco companies, who'd won 17 times in a row, Nobody can beat the tobacco companies for exactly the same reason. We got a $3 to $4 billion tax per year on them and gave it to Medi-Cal, which is the healthcare for the lowest income Californians. I closed $1 billion corporate tax loophole in California and gave it to the public schools. And I've gone around to do 50% clean energy by 2030 in 3 states to push them. So I have been organizing people around the country for the last 10 years doing this kind of thing. I've also started one of the largest grassroots organizations in the United States called Next Gen America. We're on 19 college campuses in New Hampshire. We've been here for the last 6 or 7 years. And in 2018, Next Gen did the largest youth voter mobilization in American history. We took 38 swing districts. We changed the turnout of young people in those districts from, in 2014, it was 18%, less than 1 in 5. In 2018, it was 41%. 33 of the districts went Democratic. 33 out of 38 flipped. So actually what I believe in is pushing power to the American people, to you. Where I believe the wisdom in this country is in this room and in other rooms just like this, full of people like you. I believe in the wisdom of the American people, the courage, the compassion. If it's a question between, do I want people to make the decision or the people in Washington, D.C., the politicians in Washington, D.C., I actually want the people to make the decision. So I just want to give you a little bit about myself, which is I know that people always think of me as being, I read the paper too, and I think, wow, he's a rich guy. And it's kind of a two-dimensional thing. Look, my mom was a teacher in the New York public schools. She taught in the Brooklyn House of Detention. My dad was the first generation in his family to go to college. My grandfather was a plumber. My father stopped being a lawyer after Pearl Harbor to go into the Navy to be a naval officer. And because he was a lawyer who got high grades in law school, they made him the assistant to the chief prosecutor at Nuremberg. He ended up prosecuting the Nazis after the war. And I asked my dad what that was like. One of the things was the last Nazi came out of Landau prison in 1970 when I was 13 years old, and he got pretty good press that he was supposed to be the most sophisticated Nazi and, not that bad a guy. I asked my father, did you interview him? He goes, I interviewed all the top Nazis. And I said, so is the press right? Is he not that bad a guy? And he said, this guy had 12 million slaves working for him and told me personally he didn't know they were slaves. There's no such thing as a good Nazi, Tom. And when you see something really wrong in your society, you have to fight it early and you have to fight it every day after that, or something terrible can happen, which is exactly what happened in Germany. And I'm not trying to say it's exactly parallel, but that's exactly what I was trying to do by starting the Need to Impeach movement. And again, look, the Need to Impeach movement, 8.3 million people signed that petition. That was about trying to get the voice of the American people to be heard, to say, please do the right thing, hold the most corrupt president in history to account, that it's important that the people's voice be heard. Look, right now I'm saying I want public televised hearings to show exactly what this president has done. Because I know you guys are the actual answer to impeachment. If the American people see what he's done, then let us judge. And everyone says, oh, there's no way these Republican senators will ever hold him to account, Tom. It's like, okay, let me explain something to you, which is, If the American people decide that this president has to go, those Senate Republicans are going to realize that their constituents are saying to them, you get rid of him or we're going to get rid of you. And they're going to decide, Susan Collins is going to decide in about 1 minute flat how much she always disliked Donald Trump. And so are the rest of them. It's really up to the American people to decide, which is exactly what I believe in anyway. That's why I'm pushing for televised hearings. Let us see. Let us judge. And when I'm talking about pushing power to the people, I'm talking about changing Washington, term limits of 12 years for every congressperson and senator. Look, you want to get rid of Mitch McConnell and Lindsey Graham, it's term limits. But also, if you want to get in Chris Pappas, we need to get new energy in as well as the other stuff. I'd like to say 2 more things. One is, if Mr. Trump is still in office, but whoever's the Republican, they're going to argue in November of 2020. Trump is going to say, if he's still there, okay, I'm a hateful person. I hate most Americans. I'm a criminal. Okay. I'm a really unpleasant person, but I'm good for the economy. That's his argument. And these are a bunch of socialists who are running against me. And let me say this. Look, I did build a business from scratch. I actually am a successful business person. I haven't been sued 2,500 times for failure to pay my bills. He is a fraud as a business person and a failure as a business person. And he's a fraud and a failure in terms of being the steward of the American economy too. And so I would love to have a chance to expose him for that. I believe if the argument is going to be on the economy, and at some point it always is can you be trusted? Basically, at this point, it's not just to make sure that America's prosperous, but to make sure that that prosperity is actually shared broadly. That is actually going to be the question I believe that a lot of Americans are going to be asking themselves. And honestly, I have spent decades of my life. Look, if you're an international investor, you have to understand what makes countries succeed. So if you're going to invest in a company in Argentina, you might think that it depends how the company does, that's the question. But actually, if you invest in the best company in Argentina and Argentina goes to pieces, you lose 90% of your money. So you actually have to spend a lot of time understanding how countries succeed, including this country. And I have a completely different attitude. In fact, the opposite attitude from Mr. Trump in terms of how to make a country succeed. I believe that a country succeeds by investing in the people of the country. That actually Americans are America. You are America, not the Rye coastline and the White Mountains and the streams. It's the people of America. And so when we think, how are we going to succeed as a country in the 21st century, a century that's dominated by information technology, we're going to succeed by investing and enabling each other. And so when we think about, I'd love to have this conversation directly with Mr. Trump on TV. Look, I was saying, he's confusing, honestly, for a lot of people because he is a crook. And people know that. But he is also kind of crazy. We got 78 psychiatrists and psychologists to basically confirm that. But also, he's incompetent. And so it's confusing because you never know which part of it is kicking in on any one day. But the incompetence is the part that matters going forward. Is that we actually need someone to make this country succeed the way we can succeed and to actually give Americans the chance to succeed and support them the way we all deserve. So the last thing I want to say is this. I listen to these debates. I'm running because I was so unhappy about the debates. And I didn't believe anyone was telling the truth, which is, if we want these policies, we have got to take back the government. It's not a question of what policy. It's a question of how do we get back the government so we can get all the policies. But the other thing I didn't like about the debates is this. You listen to those debates and you think, wow, America's a failed society. This sounds terrible. We've got this crisis and this crisis and this crisis. We're not a failed society. We're the most successful society ever. We have a failed government. We really do. But we're not a failed society. If we take back our government, we are going to get, as an absolute right for citizens, a better standard of living than anyone understands right now, and a better standard of living than any people has had in the history of the planet. You know, we're talking about healthcare as a right for every American. We're definitely getting that if we get back this government. We're talking about an education from pre-K through college for Americans so we can succeed. We're definitely getting that. We're talking about a living wage, so one job you can support a family. Look, if you look at the numbers, we are easily rich enough to do that. The problem is the way the money's getting split up. There's been a 40-year war, certainly on organized labor, but in general on working people, ever since the first day of Ronald Reagan. A war on working people, and you can see the money's been split up completely differently as a result, and it's all gone to the richest people and the biggest corporations for 40 years. And lastly, somehow in the United States, people have lost the idea that we have a right to clean air and clean water, that maybe someone has a right to poison you and your family so they can make more money. That's not true. No one gets to poison you so they can be richer. And that has got to be a right, and we're going to establish that, and that's going to be part of climate. That in fact, we're going to solve environmental issues from a grassroots basis, including all the way to saving the world in terms of the climate crisis. So when I look at this, I don't feel, look, I'm a total climate warrior, by the way. I don't know if you guys know this. Ask me questions on climate because in this race of all the Democrats, I have a more than a decade-long history of fighting on climate very successfully. I have a commitment to this that is deep and long and provable. I've said I'd make it my #1 priority as president, and I'd make it my #1 priority in terms of foreign policy. So there's something here. I know we have to do it, but I also know we can do it and be richer and healthier. So I am not looking at, I look at this race as like, it is going to be what we used to call playing sports, guts ball. They're going to be terrified they're going to lose. They're going to show up. If people are going to say, you know, don't get them excited because they're going to show up and vote, relax. They're going to show up and vote. And they're going to show up and vote because they realize if they lose this election, we're going to not let them cheat in elections anymore, and they're never going to win another election. And they know that. So they're going to feel like it's all on the table for them. And we're going to feel like if we lose this election, it could be the end of the world. So we're going to show up at levels that people have never seen before. The thing is, there's so many more of us than there are of them. So when we show up, my point about 2018 is when we got 41% of young people to show up, we won 33 out of 38 Republican districts. That's 41%. 50% of Americans don't vote. And as far as I can tell, they're all Democrats. So if every time the percentage goes up of voters, they're definitely showing up. But there's tens of millions more of us than there are of them. So if people decide this is the one, this is the election where we turn the page on 40 years of failed Reagan economics, social policy, and racism, we win everything. And that is actually what I expect to happen in 2020. The biggest, broadest victory in the history of the United States by the Democratic Party, and a completely different vision for the 21st century. I'm dying for some questions, Alejandro.
Excellent.
Hi, Tom. My name is Denise.
Denise, nice to meet you.
I live in Londonderry. Want to thank you for coming here, and I want to thank you for your bravery and your messages. And I've been watching you and your commercials for the last, year or so. Impeach, impeach, impeach. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes.
2 years.
Yeah. Nobody else is saying that or doing it. So I give you that. I applaud you. I like your message. My question is, you want to take back the government, which we need that. We need that. This country has to get back the control for the voters. I like how you handle that in California, but it's different in Washington. As we all saw with President Barack Obama, he had a lot of great ideas, but Congress put the kibosh on a lot of them. How are we going to get past the Republicans in Congress?
So Denise, that is a great question. And I really think about it in 3 different ways, but it all comes down to the idea of trying to push the power back to the people. Like, I actually believe the people of the United States make better decisions than the politicians in Washington, D.C., because we know so much more about what our lives are like. So the first thing is, it's actually really important to hold this election and have this conversation. For American people to agree together through an election on a mandate that we have to take back the government. So in fact, if you think about President Obama, what he really ran on was healthcare. And when he won, he immediately started to work on healthcare. And if you think about his congressional successes, that was his big congressional success. Was he had a mandate for healthcare and he got healthcare. So I know. So that's the first thing, is we have to agree that this is the point. And let me say this, everybody already knows what I'm saying is true. You know, I was in North Conway, New Hampshire 2 nights ago, so night before last, and I was really late, so I wanted to work out in the gym when it was closed, and I asked a 25-year-old kid who was on staff, so to me 25 is still young, named Frankie, and I said, hey, Frankie, would you open up the gym? And he's a nice guy, so he goes, sure, I'll walk you over, I'll open up the gym. And he said, I think I know who you are. And I'm like, yeah, you might. And he said, how come you're running? And I said, I'm running because these corporations have bought the government, and we got to stop that. So he goes, I'm only 25, but even I know that. So if we agree that's the mandate, that's the first thing. The second thing is, there are institutions in Washington which are totally defunct and moribund, like the Federal Election Commission, where you can push through, as president, the idea that we can't have dark money anymore, that you can insist on transparency and you can find the heck out of people who cheat. So that's a first step to get rid of dark money and kind of the background to lobbyists in DC. But then I agree with you, Denise, other stuff has to get passed. And I believe we will, I was talking about term limits, a national referendum. We've got to make it easier to vote, and we have to end voter suppression. I mean, it's traditionally been preventing African Americans from voting. And that happens in huge size around the United States in red states. Just as an example, Wisconsin, 2016, 100,000 African Americans prevented from voting who are American citizens. Trump won by 22,000. They're big numbers, but let's also be fair, and we've been very aware of it ourselves at NextGen. In New Hampshire, Maggie Hassan wins by 1,700 votes. NextGen registered 5,000 young people on the University of New Hampshire campus, and the New Hampshire legislature passes something that says out-of-state students going to New Hampshire colleges cannot vote in New Hampshire unless they get a New Hampshire license plate, which costs over $200. So let's just be clear. We got to allow people to vote. And lastly, we have to get rid of we have to get rid of the idea that a corporation is a person. We all know corporations are not people. That's absurd. But Mitt Romney still believes that corporations are people, and so does the Supreme Court. So that's got to change, because actually giving them the political rights of American citizens is a huge hook to hang their power on. It has to change. In every one of those, we need things to change. But to me, it's just like everything else. If the American people insist on it, it happens. If the American people don't insist on it, if we're passive, if we've done what we've done for 40 years, which is let these people walk all over us, then they win. But if we let them walk all over us, then we pay twice as much for healthcare as everybody else in the world. We pay 10 times more for insulin than Canada. We have gun violence for decades at a level that no other country in the world has, and we never change anything because the gun manufacturers and the NRA won't let us. We go 28 years without any climate legislation from the federal government when it's obviously a threat to the health and safety of every American, but very good for the profit lines of oil and gas companies. So Denise, honestly, the question is, will we stand up for ourselves and insist on government of, by, and for the people? That's why I'm running. We have to insist. If we don't, they will continue to whip us. And I honestly believe the pain in America is too deep not to stand up. If going around and seeing what it really means to have this go on for 40 years is too painful to me personally, to see what people are going through in terms of healthcare, in terms of education. The living wage, you talk to people who are being beat up in terms of wages, who are not getting a chance to get ahead, who work really hard, who are decent people being nurses and teachers and getting the heck kicked out of them. We have got to stand up and take back this government.
Thank you. My name is Michael Askenizer. I live in Hollis, New Hampshire, close to here. Thank you for being here. Thank you for what you're doing. I'm also a California native. We moved here 25 years ago.
From where in California?
Los Angeles. Yeah. Anyway, this is your first climate change question. When we had Clinton as president, we had the Kyoto Accord. That went nowhere. We had Paris Accord under Obama. That's gone nowhere. Tell us about climate change, what you're going to do, and actually something that's going to be done that's meaningful and will actually be brought into fruition and make a difference.
So let me say, Michael, that I will declare a state of emergency on day one and use the emergency powers of the presidency. So what does that mean? That means we can determine how energy is generated around the country in terms of what are the sources. It means we can determine building codes. We can put in rules on numbers of EVs and miles per gallon. So there's a lot we can do in terms of rules right off the bat. The question will be twofold. One, how do we rebuild America, which we need to do, which will take money, which has to be allocated by Congress at some point if you're going to spend the kind of money this is going to take. So I think that's a question, but we can clearly get going in a huge way on day one. Secondly, you're talking about international accords. The United States has to lead internationally because it's an international problem, and there's no other country that has the moral, technological, commercial, and financial ability to lead, and no one else who wants to. So I'll make one last point on this internationally. We have 237 coal plants in the United States of America. We have closed 290 coal plants over the last 5 to 10 years. There are 1,500 coal plants in the world. There are 1,200 more coal plants scheduled to be built. If we close 237 coal plants and the rest of the world builds 1,200 coal plants, last I checked, that's not progress. So we need to lead. There's no reason ever to build another coal plant, but we need to lead. And it has to be the primary first thing in our foreign policy, or it won't happen. As I say, if the meeting starts on Monday and a deputy junior secretary brings it up on Thursday, we're not getting any change in climate policy. It's got to be Monday morning, first thing. We've got to do this together. Let's figure out how to do it. We'll help.
Hi, Rhonda Moore, Wyndham, New Hampshire. Thank you so much, Mr.
Nice to
Steyer.
meet you, Rhonda.
It's good to meet you.
Call me Tom, please.
My question is so important to me because I get one. So I hear a lot about you're going to have to win independents and moderate Republicans to win this election. And I don't think there's anything more important for me right now than you winning this election, okay? How are you going to message to them? What are you going to say to them so that you pull them to this side so they hear you and they don't think you're just the impeachment candidate?
So Rhonda, let me say two things about this. One is, let me address your question and then let me take a step back from it. If this is going to be an election about economics and about how the country is going to do, I honestly believe that I'm the person who has spent decades more than anyone else thinking about that question. So for moderate Republicans, traditional, what you think of as business Republicans, I'm the best candidate, honestly. So of my friends in the business world, who I would say is not, extreme on social issues, but want to have a successful economy and aren't concerned really or aren't even aware about how the money is split because it helps them so much. They're just fine with that, but they want someone who can steward the economy as a whole. I'm by far the best candidate, including anybody on the Republican side. That doesn't worry me in the least. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is this: everything that I'm talking about that's good for Democratic voters, about taking back the government, they know is true too. If you talk to, why did Mr. Trump win? He won on Drain the Swamp. He won because a bunch of Republicans felt like this government's been bought by corporations. Check. It doesn't care about me. Check. We have to break it. Check. So actually, you'll never hear me say, and I do not feel 1 ounce of disrespect for Republican voters. I feel like they were responding to real fears and real needs and made a terrible decision about how to do that. But that doesn't mean that their fears and needs weren't real and they weren't worthy of respect. So I actually feel like this is the easiest question. But I also want to make one other point, which is this. It isn't going to be enough to beat whoever the Republican nominee is. And I know everybody thinks he's going to be Trump, but I'm not sure it is. But it doesn't matter. We need that, for Denise's question, we need a broad victory. We need to sweep. And that means we actually need not so much to convince the moderate Republicans and moderate independents. I know people in New Hampshire feel that way. But what we really need to do is to get a democracy where people think it's important to vote and get the turnout. And I can tell you, we've asked hundreds of thousands of young people why they don't vote. And they always say, no one tells the truth. Neither party addresses my issues. It's a failed system. Why would I participate? And so for us to turn the page on this failed Republican experiment, we're going to have to convince that 50% that actually this vote is not just critical, but it's their chance to participate in something glorious, a real turning of the page and a real step forward, a quantum step forward into the future in a good way for America. And if we do that, we're going to win in places that people can't imagine us winning. And some of the people who we most feel bad about are going to lose when they never thought they could possibly lose. And that's actually what I expect to happen next year.
Hi,
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Lex and I'm 10 years old.
Nice to meet you.
My question is, I'm a teenage climate activist, and I want to know why do you think I'm here today?
Why you're here today?
Yeah.
Like, if you're a teenage climate activist, you'd like to hear what I'm saying we're going to do so that we can actually solve this crisis? No?
Yep.
Okay. So let me say this. I have 4 kids, 31 years old, 29 years old, 27 years old, and 25 years old. And I can tell you that my 27-year-old daughter, probably a month ago, was on the phone with me, crying, saying, I don't know that we're going to be able to solve the climate crisis. 27 years old. And I told her, honey, we are going to win. We definitely can do this. We are going to do this. We're going to win politically, and then we're going to make it happen. So I was telling, I just met you, but I've known my daughter for 27 years, and I want her to believe that I'm a truth teller and that I love her. So I wasn't going to say something I didn't believe I could back up. So I would say to you, the people in this room, the adults in this room, take being responsible really seriously too, because of people like you. So I'm telling you, we will win, and we will do whatever it takes to make sure that we hand you a world that's safe, okay? Deal. Do we not have more time, Alejandro?
If I believe some people would like to have a picture with you, so there is a few more minutes, but I think you need to go somewhere else too. So you have a few more minutes for pictures.
I'd love to stick around, and I'd love to talk to as many people as would like to talk to me. It is the most important thing I get to do is talk to people and hear what you guys care about and hear what you think. I don't think anyone could possibly, with any degree of seriousness, want to be president who didn't want to hear from the people in this room and the people around the country. I think it's by far the best thing I've ever gotten to do, and also the most important thing. Because if you look into somebody's eyes and hear their actual story, it's not a statistic. And all of a sudden you realize what a living wage means to a mental health worker who hasn't had a raise and who's being treated unfairly. And you realize what it means for a mom who's worried about her kid having a condition that might kill him and they're not sure if they can afford the medical care. It's really important for me, the most important thing I can think of, to talk to people face to face just like you and hear what you care about. So if you can, please stick around. It's my honor to meet you and my pleasure to meet you.